Broadcasting from Ireland, featuring interviews with some of the biggest names in magic. Welcome to the Deceive Reality Podcast with your hosts, David Peace and Steve Spade.
And we're back. Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the Deceive Reality Podcast. My name is David Peace. Steve Spade is off gigging again this week, but I have a lovely guest joining me, Adam Hudson. Adam, how are you doing?
Yeah, I'm very well. Yeah, appreciate the invitation.
Absolutely no problem. It's great to have you on. So we always like to begin these podcasts with the age-old question of how did you get started in this magic world? And for people who aren't maybe familiar with this, your style, how did that develop over the years as well?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, well, it's quite a lengthy tale, but I'm sure we've got time. So, well, it goes back to when I was in secondary school, so quite a while ago now, over 20 years ago. I was actually as a talented footballer. I used to play for Sheffield Wednesday youth teams as a goalkeeper. So through school, that was always my identity. So I always presumed that was going to be like every sort of boy wants to play football. So I thought that was what I was going to do, and I sort of got pretty close. But then when I didn't seal a professional contract, I had this void, which was like sort of I'd lost my identity, and that was also give me a little bit of kudos. Like people used to recognise me and go, "Oh, Adam plays Sheffield Wednesday." Lost that, so I was doing a sports course because I was still interested in sport, and I went into a local library, and there was a book there by a chap called John Tremaine, quite a well-known magician, Magic and Card Tricks. So I picked that up, and I started rather than just taking it away, learning something really quick, and then going, "Oh, let me show you this." I give it the time it was due, so I put the time and effort into it. So when I did start to show people, people were like, "How have you done that? That's unreal." And I thought, yeah, this for somebody who was looking for a replacement to an identity which had been lost. I thought, yeah, this is good. I want to keep it. And then as far as the work that I do now, I did spend most of my early career as a restaurant magician, working in bars and going around tables. However, then in my early 20s, I started developing some health issues. So I started losing sensation in my legs and my hands, and I was diagnosed with multiple sclerosis at the age of 23. So because rather than waiting for that to come along and to take magic away from me, I immediately started putting things in place which were less physical, because obviously people sort of associate it with like dexterous and sleight of hand and things. So I just totally absorbed myself in the mind side of things, and then started developing effects which were less physical and more mind orientated. And then from that, a chance encounter, I met a lady who used to work for a government-funded scheme called Aim Higher, which was to get children who wouldn't necessarily go to university to try and get the entertainer thought of. So I worked for one of the reasons I'm probably not massively known in the magic community is because it's only in the last few years that I've been trying to push into it, because I spent a good decade of my career working in the education sector. I used to travel around colleges, schools, like universities, etc., doing like lectures and presentations of magic with numbers and also motivational talks.
Yeah. That's really interesting. Like listening to the journey you've been on throughout your career, and like how the diagnosis really like made you go into that certain area and that sort of stuff, which is really interesting. How like the mind stuff, it does help with you don't need to be as dexterous with mentalism or like mathematical tricks and that sort of stuff, which it is a bit of a benefit even for people with many conditions out there, that mentalism is a way to go and it's accessible to everybody, really.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, and like I said, magic's it's more than something I do. I've performed for 25 years now, and it's it's like ingrained in me. It's not. I'm not a hobbyist. I wouldn't even say I'm a professional. I wouldn't say I say it's part of who I am. You know what I mean? It
Yeah.
it's my very fibre. It's like every waking moment I think about magic. I lie in bed. Is just thinking about it constantly writing, constantly creating ideas, and especially with like the disability side of things, is when something takes from you, like my disability took away my football, you know, from quite an early age. So then I started playing tennis because I was still able, and then it took that away. And then I used to cycle, but then it took that away. So it keeps taking and taking. But like I said before, it's not having this. I refuse to let it. And it also, I feel a little bit like underestimated. Like I always say, if I was a superhero, I think I'd be Charles Xavier, that sort of thing, like that X-Men guy in a wheelchair that people like underestimate. Like if you like, I can sit there and I can't do lots of the things I used to do, but I know in my head I'm like, if you gave me a minute, I could absolutely fry your brain, and it gives me like a real sense of worth.
Yeah, absolutely. I can see that. I think like a real life Charles Xavier could be a very interesting like magical character. Like get the big comic book accurate costume and everything. It could be I hated all the comic conventions around the world. It'll be something. I have that. I have that look because I'm follically challenged, so I definitely have the Charles Xavier look going as well with my mentalism because it's a lot of mentalists seem to lose their hair after a while. I feel it's because our brains grow a bit too big that the hair falls out. I think it happened to me. It
They're
happened
like
to me
Mega
and Darren.
Mind.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
But yeah, when it's interesting how you say like people underestimate you when you go into like the performance side of things, because I think that's a really interesting thing where it's especially with people with disabilities that people can underestimate them in so many ways and be able to use magic and that sort of stuff to like completely blow them away. Because it is that thing of I was on the David Blaine masterclass thing that he's doing at the moment, and he talks about having people with really low expectations to begin with. So then when you do something amazing, it like really can blow them away. So having that like juxtaposition of their expectation to begin with and what you do at the end, I'd say gets you really good reactions.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, it's in your weakness you are strong, isn't it, really?
Yeah.
And yeah, even not just in performance, just in like everyday life. Like sort of if I got on the bus, I'd get on and I'd be like limping away, and I'm sort of like, and people, I'm really like an ambassador of positive thinking and everything. I really, I think too many times people just constantly look for the bad. And if you look for the bad, that's all you find. And you've missed all the good that's happened. Whereas I'm the opposite. I just like try and see that, sometimes frustratingly so for my wife, because I'm sort of like that person who's always trying to be optimistic. And I try and put that across into my performances as well. Because when I perform, because I've got a background in teaching, I present as almost not a bit of a life coach, really. I think I sort of present as like almost like savantism as well. I think that's my take, which I think Devin Brown meets Rain Man is a good sort of place at my work. I did a show last week. I did it to raise some money for a pal that needs an operation. He's got to go abroad for it. But it was like, just see people come up and say they're sort of inspired at the end of it. And because I'm talking about, sometimes I'm using trickery, sometimes I use generally what I'm claiming to do with like memory techniques and things like that. But other times I use the shenanigans of a magician alongside it, and it can sort of take it into orbit. But when I'm sort of like instantly memorizing a shuffle packet of cards, I'm sort of using memory techniques, but there is a trickery in it as well. but I'm using it as in an attitude of, we've all got unfulfilled potential, and the same as in, I wrote one of my effects, which is a Star Trek, which is like a star sign revelation. So it has the idea of poo-pooing star signs. So, but then in that you learn somebody's star sign. But in that, I also, the person I'm addressing, I really give a reading about how they have lots of gifts and talents and abilities, but they're a little bit scared to use them for the fear of being laughed at or not being taken seriously, which is a shame. And you should concentrate on your gifts because you are, and just to empower people. I think when perform, it's a bit like sharing a really good joke with somebody when you've sort of like had a really good belly laugh, and then you've got this bond. And it's a bit like that with magic, that you're the amazer and they're the amazee, if that's a term. So then you've got this link. So then you're in a position when they're willing to take what you say seriously, which is like quite a privileged place to be, which is, again, that comes from all the work that I used to do in schools, working alongside children, that if they didn't like you, they would tell you they didn't like you, and they were like the hardest audience in the world. But I would then end it with like a message of, I've amazed them, I've really sort of blown their mind, and then at the end, I can then be in a position when I can say to them, guys, what is it you want to do? Because you live in a privileged society where you get to choose what you want to do with your life. And that's not the same everywhere in the world. So there's certain places where you get told what you're going to do, or you just have to survive. But you've got all these opportunities to do. Are you going to use them? Because there isn't another person like you. You are, if you were a toy on a shelf, you would be called a special edition. You would be a one-off because there isn't another person like you. And that's the sort of message I bring in my sort of performances.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting because magic can be trivial or it can be profound. And I like that, like the going into the profound way of like having meaning and using it as metaphor and like making people believe in themselves a bit more. Because I think it's great sometimes when you make that, it's great being able to like memorize that card yourself and show that you can do this thing instantly. But I think it's great also being able to use magic and trickery to give somebody else an ability that they didn't know they had, or even like make it look like they don't have an ability that you know they have, but they don't know that they have it. And then you give them the ability that they already had, that they didn't know they had, that you made it look like they didn't have, if you make sense. Where you can all those body magic things that we don't know we can do until someone shows us that we can do them. But I think hiding it first and then giving it to them so that like people walk away with this new ability that they didn't have before the show can be really powerful.
Yeah, like that. Yeah, definitely. Well, I think often as performers, we can be really guilty of making it all about us. And it's too much like, how great are we? We can do these things and marvel at what I can do. And sometimes we don't leave room for the audience and using those opportunities, which is why I think you mentioned David Blaine, but is why I think that David Blaine, when it was 97, wasn't it? His first special came out. It was, it made room for the audience, wasn't it? It wasn't really about, he was doing like a lot of, we could argue overused the double lift a lot, but it wasn't about that. It was like sort of an effect, and it was about the audience and how they were perceiving it. And it was like almost turning the camera around for a moment, and it was about people. He even said in the beginning of I think it was his first special, that it was about people. There's nothing here but people and me. Yeah.
Yeah, I found it interesting. I always think of like his specials kind of like a game show where he's like the host of like Wheel of Fortune or one of these shows, and he's just the host of the show. But we don't watch the show for the host. We watch for the experience the participants are having on the show, of like them winning and losing and all that sort of stuff. And I think in his magic specials were that we were like empathizing with the contestants on his TV show, even though they were just spectators. Like, they were the people we empathized with, rather than just sitting in wonder of this amazing person, which we all did as well, being like, how can he float? How can he float?
Oh,
Back in the day.
I know. And then when you found out how it's done, and then yeah, definitely. Yeah, but yeah, I remember seeing it the first time, and I remember thinking, yeah, his arms are going up when he floats and then coming down. I just bought it. I bought into it. Yeah.
I was maybe 10 the first time I saw that special, and I spent a long time in a dark room trying to see if I could make myself levitate, because I was like, I was hooked. I was convinced he could do it. And then I remember I was showing it to someone years later, and I was like, oh, I'll do the levitation. And I did it kind of as a joke. I did the Balducci, and they freaked out. So suddenly I needed to sit down. They had to go get me water. I like played it up into this huge thing, this thing that started off as a joke. And I'm now like, oh my God, I can't move, help. I'm in bits. But it's incredible. The simplest stuff still can fright people so well.
Well, and also that Balducci levitation has really been beneficial for so many reasons for me going forward. Like when I sort of create an effect, and when you think, will that really fool somebody? And then think, I always refer back and think, yeah, but you make somebody think that you're defying the laws of gravity by going on one toe. It's like sort of, it's, although, yeah, it's how it's put across, I guess. I don't know. It's like making somebody believe in something so impossible that they could, like, emulating a skill that only Superman's had in the past, and doing it in such a primitive way, but they're willing to invest into it. I think it's like, could then sort of overlap that with, like, people's just want to believe in something, don't they? Because, like, everyone's searching and sort of like they want to think that there is something more than this 9 till 5, get up, go to work, get your Costa coffee on the way, come home, watch your box set, go to bed, do it again the next day. Everybody wants this, wants to think and believe that there is something more. So when somebody, I think it's like it's a fertile ground.
Yeah. Yeah, really, because I think star signs are massive at the moment for that sort of stuff. I really find that, like, especially the younger people, like the Gen Z types, are obsessed with star signs and that sort of thing. That they're really coming back into popularity, where like star sign divinations can become more powerful. Even I like the whole thing of like, oh, star signs don't mean anything, but you are definitely a Pisces, and just like carry on. It can really like hit strong. But yeah, that people wanting to believe and that sort of stuff. Have you ever found something where you created a trick and you thought it was really good, and then you went to perform it for someone and they were just like, that's obvious, you just did this, or something where it just wasn't fooling at all in the end?
Yeah, or that I do an effect with, it's instead of a peak, I've got a system to learn a 3-digit number without a peak, and it's through a simple game involving coins, and it uses, if it's like, if you use a 3-digit number, if it's and I get them to add 2 digits at a time, and after adding, if it's an odd number, I say you get a coin. If it's an even number, I get a coin, and we play it 3 times 3 coins. So as long as they haven't used a 3-digit number that's, say, like 3 even numbers or 3 odd numbers, so as long as it's a good combination of both odd and even numbers, it's always that they have 2 and you have 1. That's always going to be the case. It's just a bit of an overspill of me sitting there for hours and messing about with numbers. But in doing that, I also get them to tell me the totals when they're adding these 2 numbers together. And then at the end of it all, I've sort of predicted that they'd have 2 coins and I'd have 1. And then at the end of it all, I say, scumple up the piece of paper with the number on and concentrate on that for me. I'm getting a sense that you're thinking of the number 458, aren't you? And it is. And the first time I performed it, the person said, "Oh, I worked that one out. I worked that one out." But then looking back now, I realised that it didn't work out the number part when they just knew why the coins worked out, and I dismissed it for a little bit, and I sort of like thought, yeah, it's too transparent, and it wasn't until actually 2 weeks ago that I sort of took it out again, and I showed it to the local magic society that I attend, and so people who are like knowledgeable, and it blew them away, and I realised that it did have legs. So sometimes you have to revisit things, and it's just something that slightly needs twisting or slightly needs altering just to make it a little bit more believable or less transparent. Or, like I said a minute ago, it was just that I'd presumed that they knew. I just presumed that, yeah, they've known everything. They know exactly where how the coins, and they also know exactly how I know their number, and they didn't. It's just how people take things, I guess.
I do think as well, where you look at it with people, sometimes it can be your own guilt can foreshadow like how the trick works as well. At times where like the bit that you feel nervous doing, like it all goes like massively onto it and things. I always know that when I was beginning to get peaks and that sort of stuff, I'd be so guilty getting the peak that everybody knew that I was about to peak something in 10 seconds because I'd start like panicking and sweating and like oh my God, I have to do it. But then once you get more performance experience and get used to doing it, you just go, oh yeah, and you don't even realize you've gotten the peak. Sometimes it's like, oh yeah, I know what it is. It's great.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, you feel sort of dirty, don't you? But your whole demeanor changes as well, and it becomes transparent because you were acting in a certain way, and now you've suddenly acted in a different way. So people can read right through that, and they can see that you're up to something. They might even not know what you're up to, but it just heightens suspicion at that moment in time.
Absolutely. Yeah, because I've got pretty bad eyesight as well, but I don't wear glasses like full time. So sometimes when I'm like peeking a marked card or something, it's real like okay.
Definitely. I'm like Mr. Magoo. I'm like Mr. Magoo.
Yeah, it's at least you have the glasses. I always worried that I don't wear my glasses when I'm performing because I'm so worried that someone will see the peak and the reflection of the glasses and just like ruin the entire performance. It's like, hey, I can see my drawing in your glasses. So I'm like, oh God, no, I'll take them off and just work my peaks out specifically. Yeah,
definitely.
I find it interesting something you said. It's something you talked about earlier about like magic being in you, and it's just like it's a part of you. Because I feel the same way as well. It's those things that it's like an addiction more than anything. It's just a thing that no matter what you do, you just can't help it. And I know people who like play the guitar and stuff, and they pick up the guitar and they'll be strumming it while doing other things or that sort of stuff. But I don't really know of anything else that can really. It's who you are when you are like a magician and you're into magic at like the level we'd be at. Is that like it's kind of all encompassing. Like I find my fashion is dictated by magic. I was looking at suit jackets the other day, and my wife was like, "Oh, that's lovely," and I was like, "There's only one inside pocket. Can't use it. I need 3 inside pockets at least. Can't use 2 inside pockets. That doesn't work." And it dictates everything you do.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, it's my every waking moment, really. Well, no, that's wrong because I've got a wife and a daughter, so they sort of. But yeah, it is an obsession. The magic bug that sort of we get at the beginning of magic never subsided with me. I do see people who get that at the beginning and then they sort of lose that love. No, it's been. I knew it fit my character when I started doing it. It's funny as well because when I started performing magic, I could never think of a stage. I thought I had to think of a stage name for myself or sort of. But everybody used to just call, because my name's Adam, everyone used to call me Ads. So when I started doing the number things, that became really applicable like magic ads. In fact, I even once considered changing my second name to Up, then I'd beat them up. So, but yeah, it's good. I feel really privileged that I've found it, and I don't like the term tricks. I've got a little bit of a problem with it. That sort of when people say, "Oh, it's tricks," the way that I learn magic or write magic, and the way I sort of dedicate myself to it, I often think like some of the things I perform. I know I've wrote systems that have taken me literally 10 years to get to the point that they are now. Like sort of revisiting them and then coming back and going, no, it's not right. Revisiting it, come back out. And I think tricks in my head, it's a little bit like I don't in any way compare myself to a concert pianist, so don't get me wrong. But I sometimes think if a concert pianist played a beautiful piece of music, it would be really quite rude to say, "Oh, that was a mean tune." It was like, and I sort of have that idea with my magic that tricks it almost takes it down to something I don't believe it is. Like it could almost be dismissed as something you would find in a Christmas cracker, or you would find in a Marvin's Magic set, and it's more than that, in my opinion.
Yeah, it is just magic. Just stop there. Don't say magic trick. Just say magic. It's what it is.
Yeah,
There's no such thing as real magic per se. So this is as close as we can get to. So let's just call it what it is.
yeah, definitely. And because I have a Christian faith as well, so over the years I've had like really wrestled with that whole concept of, am I misleading people? Or how do I have to say a disclaimer and things like that? But I don't ever. I think Darren says a really lovely comment, and he says that I don't want. I'm not trying to. He basically says he's not trying to put it across as real, but he also doesn't want them to think it's not real, and he just wants it that for that moment, say for that 90 minutes that they're watching his show, he wants people to absolutely believe that it's real and be invested into it, just like we do when we watch a film or a piece of theatre. It's that suspension of disbelief, and then afterwards you can go away and you can start chatting with people and going, "Oh, nah, no, it can't be, can it? No, it's not. It's not. It must be sort of like he's pulling the wool over our eyes." But for that moment when the lights are down and when people are watching, they 100% are there with you, and they're believing that you're verbally manipulating them, or you're using these techniques to memorize this massive, large information.
Yeah, definitely. I think it's really interesting with that because I like the term kayfabe, which comes from professional wrestling, where it's like what happens during the show is kayfabe, and it used to be that kayfabe was never broken, so that like the good wrestlers could never travel in the car with the bad wrestlers because that would break kayfabe. But as things have evolved, like it's broken down that people know that like the Undertaker isn't an actual zombie. Do you know, people can't get into this stuff that like you get through it. But once the show starts and you're in that ring and these two people are going at it, or like maybe people are sending each other things on Twitter, and now people are like, oh, they're using their actual Twitter handles with their real names and are insulting each other. Maybe they actually don't like each other, and it's got a bit of the like suspension of disbelief for that moment and getting the people to buy in. Because I have a show called the show I perform is called Am I Psychic? And quite early on the show I say no. But could you tell the difference if I said I was? So it's like that whole show I kind of like reproduce psychic stuff. But what I found interesting is like, oh, these psychics, they're not using psychic. I'm going to use body language and psychology, and really I'm using a window envelope and magnets. You know, it's like I'm lying about what I'm doing, and while complaining about people lying about what they're doing, which is like it's such an interesting like concept as you're performing. Like, I'll tell you the truth. They're not using this. They're using this but they're actually not using that either. They're using this other thing that I'm really using in the background. It's like inception of all this sort of stuff. You've mentioned some of the stuff that you've started releasing, and you've got a book and that sort of stuff. For people who'd be interested in looking that up, what type of effects would be in there? Would it be a lot of the matte space stuff that you'd find in of your releases?
Yeah, well, but not too. I don't like the idea of like when people think of math tricks, it's very like a tweed jacket. It's like sort of. It's not. I don't want it to be seen as. It's more than that. So, well, I've released 3 books. The first one's called Out of Mind, and is With You in Mind, and then All in the Mind. And there's a 4th one pretty much written, but I'm present. I've just released some like PDFs and things on my Penguin page and stuff like that. The first stuff that I did was it starts off. I'll try and think. So the first effect in the first book is a verbal card force. So we're forcing a playing card verbally, and it genuinely is verbal as well. Obviously, things like that, they can't be 100%, but it's pretty close. And other things as well, like lost properties, another verbal force. When I just literally say to somebody during an effect, oh, when I put my wallet to one side and go, I better put that over there because I'm terrible for losing it. Do you know when you've lost something and you can't get into that part of your mind you've got to almost unlock the thoughts, don't you, to remember where you've put them. What was the item? And you're hoping that keys is the often sort of more with younger people, it's phone, but I'm really trying to push across the keys because I say, you know, you've lost something and you can't get in to that part of your mind. You've got to almost unlock the thoughts to remember where you've put them. And I also say, well, I said them rather than it, which is plural as well. So keys could be seen as plural. I also use something similar. There's some rock, paper, scissors keys in there as well. So there's trickery involved. So, and then Star Trick, which is like my star sign revelation. I really like birthday revelations. I've wrote so many birthday revelations because I can't think of a more personal thing to somebody rather than the day that they came into existence, when they sort of arrived on the planet. So I've wrote a lot of them, and I've also got a peak calculator in there, which if I'd have wrote it about 20 years ago, I'd have made a fortune. But because everybody just uses mobile phone now, it just looks completely weird to just get a calculator out. So, but there's also things that I love the. Are you familiar with like the 1089? That is like a it's a sort of like a reversal sort of thing with a 3-digit number. So I've always loved that. So, but I always wanted a way to get back to the original number. So I did that thing that took me 10 years to get back to. So there's a system in there which you can use alongside, rather than just doing the whole reversal thing. I would just say to somebody, I would open my wallet and I would just say, how much have I got in there? £10, £10.50, £10.70, £10.80, £10.85, £87. I've got £10.89. So on your phone, or your calculator, could you press enter the number £10.89, so 10.89? So I've just given the number 1089, if you know what I mean, but in like a guise of that I'm counting the change. But then they just count the change in their wallet, and then they times my 1089 by their change in their wallet. And then with the least amount of information, like I don't have to ask for all of the number, I can just ask for a small section of that, and then I'm able to reveal exactly the amount of money that they've got in their wallet. And that took me 10 years to write, but then I actually wrote a reversal of that using 9801 in 20 minutes. That's sort of like, because 1089 backwards is 9801, but you can do things with that as well. So these things like that. In the other books, I do a lot of work over the phone. I like to specialize in over the telephone magic or even radio magic. So I do a lot of things which are suitable for an audio-based audience. So that's probably the third book is a lot of things, and also roulette prediction. Like I've got an abundance of stuff. I don't even know how much magic I've written. And I think as well, because it's such a niche, I think I'm going to be a bit like Van Gogh, that people just won't appreciate it till I'm long gone. And then they'll go, do you know what? Adam actually wrote some pretty good stuff. But, I've got some, recently I've been writing things which probably are a bit more commercial, like an A-can called Sum It Up, and a cat which I published in Genie magazine. So that was in the first lockdown, so which has given me time to write all sorts of things. So
yeah, definitely. I find like the radio and telephone stuff really interesting, because it's always that thing where someone rings you up to a booking or something, and they're like, "Oh, can you do something for me now?" And it's over the phone, and you want it to be strong. Because a lot of telephone magic that's been out there for years is weaker than the stuff you do in real life. Or like when you're on the radio promoting a show, you want something that's going to be really powerful. So it's definitely cool to see books coming out with that style of magic, because it's I think it's an area that definitely has a lot to grow with, and I think the Zoom style performances has helped as well with the creativity when we all couldn't leave our house and we had to do everything over the phone or over video.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, we were sort of reliant on it, weren't we? Because I felt like I'd had a head start on everybody, because I've been doing it for years, and everybody was like clambering to get things which were suitable for like the screen, but played right in my hands. Sometimes as well, there's an effect I wrote in my second book called Your Days Are Numbered, which is quite mathematical. Again, it's a birthday reveal, but I'm like not entirely sure where it came from. Like from the aliens or somewhere. I don't really know. You know what I mean? I was like it just seemed to download itself into my head, and as well, and sometimes things just come from the bizarre. But with my MS, I get quite a lot of infections. So there was a time when I had an infection and my temperature was really high, and I'd wrote 90% of this effect, but it wasn't correct. The last bit wasn't correct. But then there was a time my temperature was so high that I was being sick. So I was lying in bed and I'm like sort of being sick into like a bag and burning up and a bit delirious. But in that state, the answer came to me, and I had a sick bag in one hand, and I was writing with my hand. I was like writing that down, and then sort of like, yeah, it's not the most pleasant of stories, but it's the truth.
It's good to have, because I've had similar, not as bad as that, but like when stuff downloads into your head ready, I've at 2 o'clock in the morning had an entire chair test just fall into my head and how to do it all perfectly. Wow. And everything just works. And a bank night as well. Only a couple of weeks ago, I had like a way to do a bank night just fall into my head, fully formed. Like it had just been stewing away in the back of my head for so long without even realizing I was thinking about a bank night. And then it's like, oh, I could just do that. Oh, there we go, I got it. And it's just like,
do you keep a notebook next to your bed? Do you have a notebook next to your bed?
The notes app on my phone is just where I go into, and I just quickly type it in there, because it's I just have loads of them. It sucks then though when you change your phone, because I've got like so many trick ideas on my old phone that I need to like dig out and like transcribe them, because it's I tend to be more on my phone to keep them, so that I always have it with me, so I can just look at it the whole time, that sort of way. And I've a few doodling apps on my phone as well, so I can do sketches and that sort of stuff. But sometimes it is a pen and paper for like drawing stuff out, I think. And it's the worst is when you're at night and you get something and like, will that work? But it's got like choreography to it, where you're like, oh, I have to walk, and it's like you have to get up and walk around the room to be like, that would work. I feel like that would work. It's very interesting. I just try to like play stuff in the air. So I'm much a visual person when I'm thinking of stuff. So I feel like sometimes I'm like the Queen's Gambit style, where she was playing chess in her mind on the roof. I'm like doing chair tests in my mind on the roof. I'm just like, oh, if you go there, and then that would work. I think I can get it. And I was like, quickly write it down.
Very good.
Do you tend
Yeah, I
to,
just
with
thought,
your notes, do you tend to write it out like fully?
yeah.
Would you write out the notes like fully, or
Um,
do you like just having keywords as you're going through it?
yeah, just no. I tend to, I'm looking at it now to sort of like that sort of thing, like sort of so. This is, where am I going? That way? Probably a bit.
Yeah, it's reversed.
Oh, is it? Sorry, yeah. So no, it's not in full form, but I have to write enough so I don't want to omit things and then be reliant that I will read it and that will take me instantly to what I wanted to remember and think, oh yeah, once I've remembered that, all the rest will come in. I can't rely on that. So I do tend to scribble down as much as I can. Maybe not in full. No, I think I do write in sentences, but just in
Yeah.
scrawl. So.
Yeah, quickly.
Yeah, yeah, I am. I would say rather than being a magic creator from the point of view of like props and gimmicks, I would say I'm a writer. I am well, I'm an author, but sort of, I enjoy writing rather than, I've made the odd couple of gimmicks and stuff, but I do enjoy, it's, I find it entertaining. I also find
Yeah.
it sounds so geeky and sort of weird, and I would find it a night's entertainment to sit there and work on a system, to get a droplet of an idea in my mind, and to spend 2 hours with some nice music on and just sitting there writing numbers out, going, no, it didn't work there, tweaking it, writing it again. Sometimes there's been times when my wife has come home and it's just been like a stack of paper with all these numbers on, and she's just like, "What is that?" It's like there's a film called The Knowing. I don't know if you've ever seen it. It's got Nicolas
Yeah.
Cage in, and it and there's that girl that just writes all these numbers down, which is like pointing to the apocalypse. It must look a bit like that when she comes home and there's all these numbers. I'm scribbling away. I know, but that rather than just sitting watching a box set, I'm sort of trying to consciously move away from technology. Like if you I've got an old Nokia phone that I've had for over 10 years. I I don't watch much television at all. I like radio more than anything. I've seen this now. I appreciate that. I must sound a bit strange, but I don't mind that. I quite like that
Yeah.
strangeness.
Yeah, I think it, cause like for me, so some things I like is Sudoku. Like Sudoku is what I do a lot of time to pass the time, or like puzzle games on my phone, or like the wheel games that I like, and that sort of stuff. And even for me, I was working on a walk around style chair test that I was working on, and it had maths in it, and I was working it out. And again, I was like writing numbers and sequences, and like, oh, if I do this, I have to do that, and then if I do that, I have to do this, and then it's like all this sort of stuff of like working it out. And then
Yeah,
I actually
definitely.
saw, I was working on it really well. Yeah. And then I saw Adam Wilbur has something coming out at some point that was better than anything I could think of, so I stopped working on it. So I was like, once I saw Adam Wilbur's version of what I wanted, I was like, yep, that works better. I'll leave it. But it might be something I'll come back to and explore, because it technically worked, but it was just inconvenient. It was rough around the edges
Yeah,
type situation. But yeah, it's interesting how that when you do get into that sort of like Rain Man style frenzy of just like, I need to get this on paper. It's in my head, but I need to get it on paper, and then go like, does
yeah,
this work? And write out all the numbers and different sequences and going, yes, that is right. It's like
yeah,
or it's not,
definitely.
and you have to start over again.
But when it
Yeah.
does, when you've like realised that you've got something and you've cracked it, it's like you could quite easily break out the bubbly. You know what I mean? It's like so, and it's like it's almost like you've created something. You've like sort of brought something into existence. I know it was there beforehand, or you've just like discovered it, but you're like, I've done that. It's like it's just I'm not musical. I can sing a little bit, but I don't play an instrument. but I get the same thrill out of what I would imagine a musician would feel when they sort of created a piece of music or wrote a song. Well, it's my work. It's my babies, if you know what I mean. I've birthed them. I've brought them into existence.
It's amazing when you get a reaction like that, like a really strong reaction for something that you've created. It's just like an incredible feeling where it's like you had this thought that just came to you, and it can feel a bit like with the guilt of like, I had this thought that was so devious, nobody else would think it fools everybody who watches it, which is like quite a weird sort of like mental thing. But it is something that's like, when you create something that really blows people away and like has a bit of a message to it and just like gives people happiness and joy, it's like there's nothing better than that.
Yeah. And I find it strange what people will give you credit for. It almost goes back to what we were talking about earlier on, but that people wanting to believe. I remember performing a Zoom show for some people, and there was a lady there, I think it was in America, but I was doing a birthday reveal on her, and I said I knew it was within 2 dates. So I said, so I usually sort of fish by saying a star sign. Like I say, oh, no, it was her son she was using, because what a date which was later than the 10th, like the day part to be later than the 10th. So it was her son's birthday that she was using. And I said, your son's not a Scorpio, is he? And I knew that if she said no, it was the other date. Whereas if she said yes, I knew exactly which date it was. But she said, no, but my other one is. And afterwards, she relayed that at the end of the evening. She said, I've no idea how you knew one of my son's date of birth, or sorry, just like the day and the month, and the other son's star sign. Like she was willing to, she was willing to give me credit for that, for sort of knowing the star sign, even though I was just using it as an example. And she just, because it was to do with her son. She had another son, and he was the Scorpio. So, yeah. But I think with mentalism as well, I often think I'm quite good friends with Mark Oberon, and who's a really beautiful thinker. He does sort of. Well, I was talking about mentalism and how mentalism and mental magic, and I think almost how it differs is that mentalism is quite an alive thing. It's breathing, it's moving, and the outcome isn't set. Often you have outs and things like that, or you're receiving the information or receiving the feedback and then moving in different avenues and things like. Whereas like a mental magic is almost it's like a magic effect in that you know that this is going to help you, this is going to start, someone's going to do this, and this is going to be the conclusion. Whereas mentalism isn't. There's often times when it's new every time. Like for example, a multi-out packet. The Hullabaloo deck which I've written, which is based on another 52-out packet by R.W. Hull, but you don't know what card's going to be named, so every performance it's different. So somebody might say the 9 of diamonds on this one, and you're like, oh great, that hasn't been named in a while, and I know that that's a really strong one. So you're almost a spectator as well. You're sort of viewing it at the same time, and lots of other examples, but yeah, that's I think where mentalism and mental magic differs.
Yeah, definitely. I think even if you know the set outcome, that bit in the middle where you can do your cold reading or mix in, and it's amazing what you get credit for with your cold reading as well. If they're like, you say, "Oh, I get the sense that you were born in the summer," and they're like, "Yes, I was July 15th. How did you know I was born July 15th?" And you're like, I didn't. I said summer.
Yeah,
I was like, yes. But it's like, it's amazing what people really like go for it. Because that's always when I find people who talk to me like, oh, you don't believe in psychics, but I went to see this person and she told me this, this, and this. How would you explain that? And I was like, wasn't there, you probably told them yourself. But I don't say that, and I go, well, like without me being there myself, I can't really say. But it's that sort of stuff that you see when you're performing, that people are giving you information which you repeat back to them, and they react as if they didn't just tell it to you 5 minutes ago. It's a weird way our brains work.
Yeah, just echoing it back, which is like a psychic's technique, isn't it?
Yeah. Yeah, it's very good. It's like, oh, you brought, and I think one of the big ones as well is acting like you didn't hear or speaking over them. So like if you go, I'm getting the name John, and they go, that's my bro. Oh yeah, you're getting that. John is definitely something. You know that they were going to say brother, but you didn't let them finish it. So later on, you go, and John's your brother, right? And they're like, oh my god, how did he? It's like, by being rude and interrupting you. That's it really works.
I remember being in, I was in like a local bar. I was meeting my friend, a lad called Joel Dickinson. He's quite, he's a magician as well. Don't know if you've heard of Joel. Yeah, I've known Joel since he was 15, and I was like sort of late teens. We were sitting at the back of the local magic society, sort of like giggling at the sort of performances we were watching. But I remember I was meeting him in a bar, but Joel often can be a little bit fashionably late. So I was at the bar, and it was like a dog-leg bar, so there was like an L round, and on the other side, I could hear this lady talking to her friends, and she was saying about how her horse had a problem with its hoof, or it got like a splinter in its hoof or something like that. And then later on that night, probably about 2 hours later on, like Joel had arrived and was sitting there having a bit of sort of jam session, really. And this lady came over and she saw Joel, and Joel had obviously performed for her before. So she said, "Oh, it's Joel. Joel, oh, would you perform some magic for me?" And Joel, night off, he didn't really want to. So he said, "Oh, no, he will," sort of like, and asked me if I would. And I was like, yeah, I will. And I showed something, and it didn't go down too great. It was all right, but it didn't get the sort of the reaction I hoped for. So I just looked at this lady, and I just said, "I get a sense that you keep some sort of four-legged animals, don't you? Do you keep horses?" And then she went, "Yeah." And I was like, "One of them's had a problem with its hoof recently, hasn't she?" And all I did was just quoted exactly what I'd heard her say 2 hours later on the other side of the bar. And she seemed like quite a rational person, but in that moment she just looked at me and just went, "Are you the real thing? Are you the real psychic?" And all I'd done, if she'd have thought about it, she'd have thought, well, I was actually talking about it on the other side of the bar like 2 hours before. But yeah, I felt a bit bit naughty because I just allowed her to sort of think what she wanted. I didn't like go, "Well, I heard you 2 hours ago." I just sort of, but yeah, it's,
Yeah, but definitely is that thing where you get the guilt. Because one of the times I felt really guilt on stage, I was doing at the end of my psychic show, I talked to the dead in a way I use a switch box, so I talk to nobody. So it was like I talk to people I know, but I get a spectator to do it as well, so like they can read the mind of somebody else or hear a ghost voice in their head type situation. But as I was doing it, I was looking at this person who's holding a billet that I wrote, and I'm just reading the information back to them, but I just felt dirty. I just felt absolutely disgusting doing it. And I kind of used that afterwards in the performance of being like, I actually said on stage, that's one of the most disgusting things I've ever had to do. And that's how I don't understand how people do it on stage all the time. So I could use the emotion, but I remember doing it. I was just like, this feels icky. It's like, it just feels like I'm taking advantage, even though it was fake information that I was revealing. It still had that feeling. I couldn't imagine doing it with real people's like information the way some of the mediums do it. It's absolutely mad.
Yeah, there's a fine line, isn't there? There's a fine line. When you were saying that, I've heard everybody calls it billet, and I'm not sure if that's. it might well be. But is it not BA? Because that's French for ticket. BILLET is BA, and it's French, and it means ticket, which would make sense. I don't know. We all like billets and stuff, but I think it's BA. I think, but I'm not going to start a movement to sort of get everyone to call it that.
It might be the
wrong.
origin.
Yeah.
We can't settle on equivoke, equivocate, or just if we can't settle equivoke and equivocate, we're screwed. Because it is that thing you go equivoke, equivocal, magician's choice. Anyway, carrying on. Yeah, I think just magician's choice is the safer bet. I mean, that's
definitely.
So we have a segment on the show called "The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly," which is all about a funny performance story that made its performance started off well and maybe went downhill to hilarious consequences for us, maybe not for yourself. But you have a funny performance story that comes to mind for you.
Well, I thought about this beforehand, so I've got the good. I was just going to say is I'll end with the bad, if that's okay. So I'm going to go good, the ugly, and then the bad. So the good story is I had the privilege to go to Uganda in 2009, and I worked in some schools and some orphanages, and I was there's some photos my wife took. She did a really good job because actually I was performing. I wasn't doing any mentalism or anything like that because there was such a language barrier. I just did things like the acrobatic matchbox, or I do like the silver balls effect, which is one of the first effects I learned from that John Tremaine book that I said at the beginning. When you take 3 pieces of tinfoil, put one in your eye, one in your ear, and one at the back of your head, and they all come out your mouth. And I did just things like that for about 20 minutes. And my wife took these pictures of they were in the Watoto orphanage. So they'd been taken off the streets. So they were sort of these, and the eyes on these kids, the photos that she took of them. The video is on my website of it. And it was just a privilege. It was just you could just see they were absolutely lost in wonder and amazement, but an innocence about it as well, an unjaded innocence, because they weren't the MTV generation. They were just kids that had been born on the streets, and been taken out of it, and they were just watching this magic, and they were just but smiles as well. So without going too much, that's my good. Yeah. My bad, it's got to be I auditioned for Britain's Got Talent on their second series in 2008, which was a bit of a lot of my work. I really need, and it was a little bit when magic was seen quite taboo and at the beginning. Simon came across really disliking it, and I don't know if you've ever done it yourself, but it was, I don't know what it's like now, but in 2008 it was very hostile. You're coming out and you get booed for saying your name and stuff like that. It's before you've said anything, there's people strapping for you to go. And I just remember I need a chance, you know what I mean? I've got to and I wasn't going to get a chance. I wasn't get a chance. I don't come out in a puff of smoke and with dancing girls. I come out and I want to. And as soon as I said, I do mathematical illusions, it was just so. But I learned a lot about myself in that as well, because I never took the bait, if you know what I mean. I stayed true to myself. Anything that was said to me, I was just well, that's your opinion, and I appreciate that. And so that's my bad. And it's but then the ugly or the weird, which is a strange story. I was doing a show in a school, and I was using called the Locked Room Mystery, which is in Cal Fulves's book, Self-Working Number Magic, and it's just just a simple thing. Well, it's not. I only really perform my effects now, but this was one I used to use, and it's a box noughts and crosses board. I sort of tweaked it a bit so the whole class could play it at once. Not box noughts and crosses board, and that's numbered 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. I get them to use a coin as like a marker, and that represents them, and they can move it up, down, left, or right, and then you're telling them to cross out certain rooms, like. And I said, if they're in that room, they're out of the game. Whereas if I'm trying to guide them to safety. So as I do it, I was going, and the next room to go is room number 3. And if they're in that room, they're out of the game. But it should be, because they can't move diagonally, that mathematically they should all end up in safety. But these are stragglers, and they all get. So people do get sort of blown a bit, hypothetically, in the game. But they all get proper into it as well, because they're like, "Oh, I've just moved out of that room," and it's like sort of. And then it was on the penultimate time that I was going to cross out a room, and I just went, and the next room to go is room. And just as I pursed my lips to make this explosion sound, I couldn't have timed it any better. This massive clap of thunder just went boom, like right above the school, as if it was like in the sky directly above us. And like these kids just all like stunned, and they all just looked at each other as if to say, "Oh my word, I think he controls the weather as well."
That's brilliant. And you take credit for it. You always take credit for it.
Absolutely. Yeah, definitely. The shaman that I am.
Yeah, that's so good. Oh, you'd love that. You'd love like a clear day, and just as you're about to do something, you put up your hand and like clouds come in. And you're like, "Yep," and snap your cards on top of the deck.
Oh yeah.
Something so mundane, but like that's
Definitely.
super powerful. You can see.
Yeah. I love things like that, because when you sorry, I cut in there.
No, carry on.
When you've been performing for like I've been performing for 25 years, so the stories that occur that you can't explain, that are weird like that. I remember there was another time, and I'd done a gig just like in the local town, and then I stopped at my friend's house just for a cup of tea on the way home. So it wasn't long, because I had all my magic stuff with me, till he said, "Oh, go on, show us a trick, Abs." So I did this card effect, but when I pulled out I had like a few packets of cards in my sort of case. So as I pulled my cards out, one card must have like fallen out, like the 6 of diamonds. We'll say it was the 6 of diamonds. Can't remember what card it was. It must have fell out, and it fell down by like, the plant in the corner. And then I performed some effects for him. And then later on, his wife returned home. And so it wasn't long before she was like, "Oh, go on, show us something." And I opened my case again. I didn't know it was a different pack. It was just another pack. So I picked up that pack, ribboned them out, and she took a card out, and it was the 6 of diamonds. It was exactly the card that had fallen on the floor. But no, that's not the weird thing. The weird thing is, as she took that card out, her 2-year-old son, saw this card on the other side of the room, walked over, picked this card up, and brought it over to his mum. Just as she was pushing it back in the deck, her son was stood on her shoulder, holding this card, and sort of like, and handed her the exact card. Now, every time I see him, to this day, even though this was about 15 years ago, they're always like, "How did you do that trick when Dylan brought the card over?" I've no idea.
It's so good. I remember the day after my wedding, I did an Andy Cardinale number with my dad as a joke, and it just hit. He said the 4 of clubs. He said 20 something, and it was there. I should have stayed calm and was like, "Yeah, I lost my shit. I was like, what?
Oh.
No way. I was like, I couldn't keep it in. I was too excited, but it is those moments that make it worth its while. So we've crossed over the hour now. So for people who want to reach out to you, get in touch, or maybe pick up some of your products, where's the best place for them to go and find out more about you and the stuff you offer?
My website, if that's okay. Which am I allowed to give that? My website is Magic.
I'll put it in the description.
Sorry. All right, yeah. My website is Magic Ads, which is Magic Alpha Delta Zulu.co.uk, and my books are on there, and my products and things like that. And also, there's an interactive zone on there with a couple of things, and also some of the radio pieces that I do. So, yeah, that's the best place. Oh, there's stuff on Penguin as well, but yeah, it's all linked to my website, so that is the best place to go.
Yeah, I'll make sure I put that in the description of this as well, so people can just go down there and get it, and in the audio version as well. So I think that's really good. And if you've enjoyed this, please subscribe, hit the like button, all the Facebook stuff or YouTube stuff that you meant to do. That will really help us. Follow us on Deceive Reality Ireland on Instagram and Facebook and all the other places as well. Adam, it's been an absolute pleasure having you on the podcast. It's been really good and really insightful. And thanks for sharing all the stories and everything. So we definitely have to have you on again another time when Steve's available as well for part 2 to carry on and really get through it.
Yeah, it'd be a pleasure.
Absolutely. So thanks so much, everyone. And we'll see everyone again next week for another interview and more other videos. So make sure you keep it locked to the channel, and we'll see you.